if I come to my team with a project and they are not passionate about it, then I'm not doing it, because they're the ones who are going to be on the phone. They're the ones who are going to be like having to stomp the yard. They have to understand it enough to really like champion it and, bring it beyond the goalpost. Like, obviously, I'm doing my own thing. I have my own relationships, and making my own phone calls and stuff like that. But if there's not one member of my team who is like, oh, DeWanda, this blew me away, then I'm just not gonna fight by myself. I'm just not gonna do it. And that's the honest to God answer.
Hi, I'm Rochelle Rose from the SAG-AFTRA Foundation. Thank you for joining us to talk about fostering a strong relationship with your agent. We have two agents from CAA along with their clients. It's an honor to introduce Andrea Weintraub with her client, Max Minghella, and Anabel Young with her client, DeWanda. We want to really dig into what it means to have a healthy relationship, a really good, successful working relationship for actors with their agents. And of course, the reason why we've invited you is because we know that you are exemplary in this field, that you have really successful relationships. And so I want to sort of go back to the beginning and discover from each of you, Max and DeWanda, how did you, and let's start with Max, how did you first, how did Andrea come onto your radar? How did your relationship, where did it begin? How did it begin? And can you give us an idea of how it started for both of you?
I had been working with Tony Lip for a long time at CAA. He'd worked with me since I was 16 years old. And he went over to Anonymous to become a manager. And, as is often the case, you then sort of get passed on to people that you don't know. And in my case, I was introduced to Michael Cooper and Andrea Weintraub, and what a blessing that was. Andrea and I are, I think, basically the same age, and that has been a really unique and special part of our relationship together. I feel like we're really kind of growing together and developing together, and I felt that from day one. In short, I think we have a positive and industrious relationship because of how good she is. That really is the basis of it. She's a phenomenal agent. There's a reason that she has a reputation that she has. I'm very, very lucky just to be sort of in her orbit. But I have so much respect for her and gratitude towards her. And so I think that really is, for me anyway, the foundation of why I enjoy it so much and why I feel so lucky to work with her.
Yeah. Comparable, very comparable. Anabel's a star. She's a rising star. I think a lot of actors, don't necessarily think of their reps in that framework, but there are absolutely like extraordinary agents and managers out here. And I just think Anabel is one of them for sure. She was on the desk of one of my other agents, Tracy Brennan. Tracy's notorious. Tracy's like such a bulldog, aggressive in the best way, but also very soulful, very soft. And I think that is the culture under which Anabel was, I don't know, germinated, raised, however you want to phrase it. But she came on formally, as an agent on my team around like a little before this time last year. And we just share tastes. I mean, I think we have a foundation of like a certain value system too. Like there's a lot of alignment in terms of, just how we live our lives. And then on top of that, it's very rare that she'll, send me something that she responded to and I don't respond to in kind. And that is immeasurable.
That's fantastic that you found someone that shares your taste. I think that's probably a great, common denominator, a great place to start. One thing I want to ask you both about, because you both were already at CAA when you started your relationships with Anabel and Andrea, is, you know, the conversations that you had with the people that were already representing you in order to sort of add people to your team. You know, and I know you have a commercial agent and Max, a literary agent at CAA. So is that sort of the philosophy, that to keep you in the fold, and you speak to the people who you already have a relationship about what your goal is, and they recommend somebody from the team to help you with this specific goal? Is that how it works?
Dee, you should take this.
I would love to hear. I would love to. I have a huge team, y'all. Just FYI, my team. So, like multiple commercial. I have like multiple comedy agents. It's huge.
I mean, I was a massive fan of Max's, and I asked, and I raised my hand, and I said, you know, I had recognized that there was an opportunity for somebody to join his team, and I immediately went to Michael Cooper at the time, and I said, I'm a huge fan of Max's, and I was a young agent at the time, and I saw the exact potential that Max spoke about earlier, which was that we could grow together. He already had an extraordinary career at the age that he was, and I really, really wanted somebody that I could sort of grow my career with. And I remember we had this lunch and we clicked instantly, and then it was off to the races from there.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about that conversation, the lunch that you had. It's sort of amazing that you know, your personalities clicked, and DeWanda talked about values, you know, life values outside. So what I'm wondering is, you know, in terms of materials, what goals, or what did that discussion look like, Max? How did you describe to Andrea where you wanted to go and what you wanted to achieve, and what did you already have in mind that you knew you needed her help with?
I'm so much more interested in what Andrea has to say.
I mean, I just remember, I feel like it was so long ago now, which 8 years is not that long ago, but I remember we more just got to know each other and talked about the things that we liked to watch. Max is a huge pop culture aficionado, and I really, really responded to that. And we found out we liked the same movies and the same television shows. And then it was just sort of, okay, we're going to work together. And I think in working together, we got to know each other's tastes and really found that thankfully our tastes aligned. And Max and I are very much in agreement on a lot of the things that he then ends up doing. We really respond to the same type of material and vision for what's next in his career.
I think that Andrea is, you know, I know this of Anabel too. It's like, it was so obvious in the first meeting for me that she's a worker. You know, that's a key thing for me. Like, my parents are both immigrants. I'm sort of a half immigrant, but I have that kind of mentality just boiled into me, which is the workaholic, maybe probably unhealthy workaholic gene. And I just remember that. And it was so clear that Andrea is going to be a very ambitious person and somebody who's really going to put the work in. I think that's where I'm so lucky. I don't know if that's the case with everybody. I feel like even as she's become so successful in this 8-year span that we've been working together, and has, you know, I feel like I'm very lucky to still get a phone call from her from time to time, but she stayed exactly the same. She works just as hard. You know, she really does. There's nothing, she's got no ego about it or vanity about it. She's always been a grinder, and that's what I just recognize so fast.
Annabelle, how did this happen? Because I actually never asked. I just remember one day Tracy was like, "I'm adding Annabelle to your team," and I was like, "Great." Like there was no, I didn't request. There was no like complaint. It was just like, okay.
I think honestly, there was a moment where one of your movies, which we can allude to, was out, and we were talking about it, and I was just with Tracy out of that meeting, and I was like, she's amazing, I love her, let me know how I can help. You know, similarly to Andrea, it just came out of a place of passion. And then Tracy, like the next day, took me up on it and was like, "You're gonna meet DeWanda."
I just thought Tracy got sick of my shit and was like, all right.
No, not at all. And like going back to what DeWanda was saying about having a big team, I mean, it's because I think Rochelle, going back to your question of how that happens, and is it, you hear one goal and then you kind of ask someone that has aligned goals to come in. I think it's less so than that. I think it's more just people just gravitate towards that client and raise their hand and can help in all these different ways. And, my relationships aren't the same as Tracy's, and the things that she's reading are not the same thing that I'm reading either. And so just having multiple POVs, I think, is always really helpful too. And I think Tracy recognized that. So
That's great.
I think what's interesting, I think, something that's really interesting about both of you, DeWanda and Max, is that, you are both producing films, television scripts, and also, I think in both cases, helping other people to do the same. And so this seems like a much larger endeavor, perhaps, than just the acting lane. And so one thing I want to talk to you both about, DeWanda, is like, I've noticed when I look at your filmography, how many shorts you've made. So many shorts. And then, as an actor and then also as a producer. And so I'm wondering, when you talk to your team, based on all of the experience you've gained from making those shorts as an actress, what is valuable to you now at this point when you decide to help somebody else make their short, or when you choose to create one? What is the driving motivation there with shorts?
That's a great question. Story first. Story first always. And I think, it's super simple. There are so many filmmakers now who are, I have 2 shorts on my resume with Nikyatu Jusu, who like came out blazing Sundance before the last one or whatever. And it's that I recommend to actors, early career actors all the time to network laterally. Like, that's all it is. Like, all it's ever been is, feeling like, and even at the like massive level, like feeling like I'm just making stuff with my friends. That's the way that I always want it to feel, and that kind of stems back to the culture that, Anabel and I share. So there's no formula. There's no like one size fits all. I don't have, I know sometimes actor producers have like a specific like mandate, you know what I mean? It'll be like feminist or whatever. Like sometimes they'll have like very specific, kind of agenda in that sense. And I don't, I like hard stories. I'll say that. I like, uncomfortable human stories that, might other people might find a little like squeamish or a little less commercial. I think there's so much space, especially in the short film, to tell those stories. But it just has to like any artist, it just has to really hit. That's what it takes, I think, to see anything through to completion. You just have to like really, really, it has to hit somewhere deep enough that you'll, put up with all the stuff that is required to make it happen.
And your team are supportive, because we don't think of shorts, shorts aren't money makers. So, but it's about building a career, I assume.
I think my team knows. Yeah, they know. I mean, it's no secret. I think every like artist is on that. Like, I mean, everyone knows like artists will work for free. I'm glad that we don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad also, but I think that, for my relationship with DeWanda, and I think where, agent and client relationship should stem from is from being fulfilled. And maybe that has to do with money, but most importantly, I think it comes from a creative space. And we're talking about artists, and, whether it's, like DeWanda says, whether she just wants to be challenged, which I know she does for every role, that's what we're looking for, whether it's a big, small lead supporting, big budget, indie. It's always a conversation too, just to figure out, what will this do for you? Is this something that you feel like you need to do deep down? Is this something, you're doing for other people? But, it's not black and white ever. And that's why it's always worth a conversation.
And just to get a little bit to the build of your career as well, if you don't mind, DeWanda, I also, it's, you did so many guest star roles. It's like every show that shoots in New York, you guest starred. And
Yeah.
then right, and then you made that leap to series regular, and then you made the leap to like huge budget, big budget studio movies. So that's a fairly sort of traditional, in a sense, trajectory. And so I know you said you've been working with Anabel for a year, but at what point did you make the leap to CAA? Because presumably you didn't start there.
No, I did not. I did not. I started working with CAA in 2018. Man, I had a couple of years there where, and this is going to happen again next year. It cracks me up where, where some of my projects will be pushed off. So they'll be like, it'll be, you know, I worked on a show about 3 years ago and it's going to come out next year. You know what I mean? So I had a couple of years like that where it was like, you know, 2017, I had 3 projects come out within a 2-month radius. 2019, the same thing happened. So right in between those two, I started working with CAA. So yeah, that was 2018.
And when you started with them, was there a point where you had to share materials, or was it a conversation? Was it, you know, at that point, were they looking at your reel or?
Oh yeah, I was working on a play in New York, and I was like, yeah, come see me in this play, y'all. Like, you know, it's very important. It was very, very, very important for me, for all of my reps to like know the core of the artist, you know, that I aspire to be still, you know, because it's one thing to represent an actor and kind of like see them on the page or see them at face value and be like, oh, okay, cool, I know what to do with her. And it's another, you know, there was I met with an agency before I left New York. This was 2012. I met with this agency and they were like, DeWanda, we don't really know what to do with you, because very sweet, but they were like, you look like this, but you're doing all this character work. And I was like, yeah, I like to act. You know, so it was really important for me that CAA knew that they knew I like to be challenged, that they knew that I wasn't just trying to be like, you know, model acting for the rest of my life. And yeah, it was essential. And I feel like, you know, it's not a conversation you have once. It's a conversation you have repeatedly. You know, anytime there's a project, if there's a like reason I pass, I joke about it. I'm like, do y'all want the dissertation or do you want the polite no thank you? You know, so they know me really, really, really well. Like they know how my brain works at this point.
And we always ask. I always call her after I see it, and I go, okay, what was the real? Just
what is it? Yeah.
You know. So.
Oh, that's amazing. And I want to get to Max. I feel like you had this amazing filmography. When we look at the films that you were doing earlier on in your career, just really interesting films with really interesting filmmakers and other actors. Just even if they were smaller roles, you were working in top-notch projects, let's say. And then it seems like it seems to me, and that there's a turn right around the time that you started working with Andrea, where you made a huge film, like a relatively huge film. And so I'm wondering if you can talk to us about, and also at the same time, well, you tell us, you know, you've signed on to a television show, which has been massive in our pop culture, and for which, congratulations, you have been SAG Award nominated. Can you talk to us about how those things happened and the trajectory of those things happening, and how you worked with Andrea during those periods?
I can, yeah. I mean, before Andrea and I had started working together, I basically had taken a step back from acting for a couple of years. I'd been, I'd written a movie that I produced and took some time. I produced another film, and there was just a chunk of time where I wasn't really looking to act. I'd had these ambitions to try these other things, and story as old as time. You know, I ran out of money. It was a really kind of simple thing, and I remember calling Andrea pretty desperately and being like, "I need a job." It was a really simple phone call. It was just like, "I need a job," and I did something that I recommend to everybody because it was useful. It was a useful like mental exercise. I basically just started taping for anything. It didn't matter what it was. I just started taping. I was doing like 3 tapes a day, and I wasn't being precious about it. I just wanted to honestly warm up again. I hadn't acted in a while. It was a way for me to get a feel for it, fall back in love with it, and let go of the idea of results. That was the best piece of it, is when you're making that many tapes and you're putting yourself out there that much, you let go a little bit of the fragility of it, of like, am I going to get this? Your expectations just go away completely. You forget almost which things you've taped for and which ones you haven't. And, you know, Andrea had come to me with a project that she was so specific about and had such a strong instinct for, and I read it too, and I think we both were just blown away by the writing. And Andrea can talk about this more, but it was an interesting situation. Basically, what happened is we had 2 sort of competing projects that came about, and one of them I would say was maybe more obvious on paper. And I think thanks to Andrea's guidance and wisdom, which she dines out on to this day, she really steered me in the right direction, and it was a decision that really came from, I thought, quite impressive place. It wasn't coming from a place of ego, or it wasn't a monetary thing. It really was her recognizing that one piece of material on the page was stronger than the other. And I think it's a rarity that an agent would be so driven by the quality of material. So I'm endlessly grateful for all of her advice on that. It was fantastic. But Andrea, you just...
Thank you. I think we were really lucky that we sort of got into a position where we had 2 projects that very much wanted Max, and they were very much competing projects. He could not do both. And the one that he ended up doing, that we chose, it was a long discussion. And it was sort of, I think the other one, as Max said, felt a little bit more obvious. And I think from a life standpoint, he was just about to go direct his film. And so it would have made that a little bit easier to prep for the film, and the project that he then ended up doing just didn't seem, it was a really big risk and it was a really big swing, and it was based on a book, and I absolutely fell in love with the book, and I fell in love with the writing of the script. And I think that we all collectively as a team sat there, and his manager and his other members of his team, and we all really felt like it was something that could be really special if it worked. And I really felt, and I think as an agent, there's a time where you really have to, if you feel very, very passionate about a piece of material, you have to say it. And you have to really advocate for that. And it's sort of about seeing the long game for the potential in success. And with this particular piece of material, I just had this gut feeling that it could do something really special for the longevity of Max's career. And it was a conversation, and it was a decision. And thankfully, it paid off. Sometimes things don't always pay off. Thankfully, it paid off, and it opened doors. And I think that we can say, like, the performance in that project is brilliant.
It is brilliant, and I hope everybody knows what we're talking about. But one question I have about that is, you know, that you're in season 6, or you know, we finished season 6. I'm assuming there's a season 7, and we know that, you know, those basic contracts often tie you into 7 seasons, whether or not it goes 7 seasons. So I'm wondering if you can tell us, because Max is prolific, you know, and you know, fortunately is also doing these really interesting things in between seasons. And I'm really looking forward to the film that you have coming with Sienna Miller, Cillian Murphy, Chris O'Dowd, we can't say the name, but, you know, all of these really interesting projects. So how do you navigate that? You know, when this is such an interesting show, it's such a brilliant role, I'm sure it's fulfilling for you, but you have this thing that you're committed to and other projects which you...
The honest answer is when I signed onto the show, I was very daunted. I'd never done television before at all. I'm a pretty, you can probably tell from this conversation, my attention span is very small as a person. I'm very kinetic. It's hard for me to sit still, and that's a metaphor for my life. So the idea of doing one thing for a long period of time was daunting and not honestly exciting to me. It has turned out to be the greatest blessing of all time. I've actually loved it. I've loved the stability of it. I've loved the structure of it. That particular production is a very unique one, and that normally I think everyone in any industry, no matter what your job is, there's normally one person in the office who's an asshole. It doesn't matter what you do for a living, there's like one bad egg, and we don't have that bad egg on that particular show. That's been the sort of the miracle of it. So I've always looked forward to going back to it. Again, you don't know on television what your role is going to be exactly. I had 2 lines of dialogue or 3 lines of dialogue in the pilot that I signed on for. So I didn't know really what this character was going to be. I've been very grateful for the fact that I like the character so much. So it's been a real blessing in my life. I shot the pilot when I was 30 years old. I'm going to be 39 when we finish. So it's been a real chapter of my life. I'm just endlessly grateful for the structure. So yes, it sometimes it prevents me from being able to do other things, or there's hindrances, but I've never once resented that because of, more than anything, just the stability and the positive working environment. It's been we should all be so lucky to work with people that talented and nice. That's all we can ask for.
That's really good to hear.
We have an audience question which sort of ties in with something that Andrea touched on. And it's basically, what's the most effective way for clients to foster quality relationships with you, Anabel and Andrea, between jobs?
I think it's always communication. I am not of the belief that when a client is on set, you're not talking to them. And I think it's consistently checking in. I think it's always trying to formulate a plan. So if somebody's doing a show, you know what the hiatus window is going to be, and it's figuring out how to maximize that opportunity. For Max, it's very unique. It's figuring out, is it going to be going to be an acting job, or is it going to be, is he going to go direct something, and really finding the balance. And I think Max, I would say we found a really good balance of doing that during the show, where you've been able to do both. But it really, I think, just any sort of relationship, it's communication, and it's keeping those lines open and talking about what's working and what's not working, and how you as an agent can be helpful in continuing to further along the career.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to it too, that no one is a mind reader, and in our jobs, it just evolves so quickly and so much. And, I think sometimes goalposts change. And so just making sure that we're always on the same page, and that we're checking in, and just, making sure that the challenges that jump up and, are unpredictable are ones that we're kind of tackling together.
And because communication is such a huge part, obviously, of fostering a strong relationship, and you both, DeWanda and Max, you have teams. How do you communicate with your team? And what I mean by that is, you have an idea, it's a goal or something you want to do or something you've heard about. Do you email? Do you call? Is it too many emails? What's too many emails? What is there a rule? How can you discuss what that communication looks like for both of you?
I think at its best, truly, it requires a degree on both sides, on from everybody, of radical acceptance. I am characteristically pretty zen. I'm not like a high neurotic, artist. My husband, I'm married to actor Alano Miller. He's very he's an extrovert. He's here. He's going to come, with passion, and he has his reps kind of reflect the balance of that. And so, I kind of joke about it, but I have a very, very, very ambitious and hungry team, because I don't necessarily carry that. And maybe, Anabel might disagree, but I don't carry it in the Hollywood sense. That's just, I always say Hollywood is not my ministry, So that's to say, that's the foundation to say, if I come to my team with a project and they are not passionate about it, then I'm not doing it, because they're the ones who are going to be on the phone. They're the ones who are going to be like having to stomp the yard. They have to understand it enough to really like champion it and, bring it beyond the goalpost. Like, obviously, I'm doing my own thing. I have my own relationships, and making my own phone calls and stuff like that. But if there's not one member of my team who was like, oh, DeWanda, this blew me away, then I'm just not gonna fight by myself. I'm just not gonna do it. And that's just like, that's the honest to God answer, and there have been projects that, we've been working on for years, because that's how long it takes to make a lot of this stuff happens. And anything that I'm still working on, at least there's one member of my team. And the communication thing, it's different for each and every single rep. And I respect that. For context, I have my little email account and it is at zero. All of my emails are at zero. I'm an at zero kind of person. I don't have no text messages. It's at zero. These reps get like 1,000 emails a day. They get like so many emails. There's so many emails. There's so many meetings. I try to know the meeting schedules because I respect their time. If I send an email and no one responds to the email, then I'll text or I'll call to be like, hey, what's up? I just sent you this thing. Oh, it got buried under 1 trillion emails. Of course it did. So it's a level of like a real ebb and flow, a real, sense of like radical acceptance and communication. So it's yes, it's like saying the thing, but it's also knowing, in addition, there was one moment first of all, during the pandemic, I was extra soft. I was just like, and we're still in the pandemic, whatever. But I was just extra soft. I was like extra mindful that people are working remotely. They're with their families. All this like crazy shit is happening in the world all the time. Like I just have that awareness that, all of my reps are human beings too. I don't send weekend emails if I can stand it, even though I know everybody's on their emails on the weekends. I'm not going to do it. I'm not sending the emails. I'm not calling you unless I'm like, on doing press or I need to. So I try to be super duper respectful of their time and their interests.
I think also, just to add on to that really quickly, I don't want to hoard all the time, but just going on top of what DeWanda was saying, I think she's a very empathetic person, as I think everyone can understand, and she puts herself in our shoes, which not everyone does, but there's that level of respect that she has for us that we reciprocate with her. And I think just a level of empathy that we give each other that allows for a vulnerability so that she can call and say, hey, I'm feeling a certain type of way. I would like thoughts here. I want some support, feedback, whatever it is. And we can also be vulnerable too. And I think that we just create a safe space for each other so that, we can talk everything out because as DeWanda said, we're all human and we're just kind of navigating it together.
This sounds like a very healthy relationship. So respectful. But also I was struck by trust. DeWanda, what you were talking about, it relates to an audience question that we had that was basically, how do you advocate for yourself if an agent disagrees with your idea? And so I was really struck that your barometer is, if there isn't one person on my team who agrees, then maybe this isn't a good idea. Mm-hmm. And what a wonderful guideline to actually have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough. And there are plenty of examples, plenty of examples of actors and writers and directors who are like, no one believed in me. And look at me now. That's just not me. It's just not me. It's just not me. I go where I'm loved. So I understand if there's something that you're working on and none of your agents respond and they're not really, they're just not really helping you, then it's simple. You're going to have to do more work. Like you're going to have to do the legwork. You're going to have to really like go through that Rolodex of, people that you've worked with and really do the groundwork of like producing it yourself, which is beautiful and valuable. And, when that happens, if that happens, you can only hope that, if your agents are by and large, or your reps are by and large working for you in every other way, don't hold that chip on your shoulder. Let it go. Like, keep it moving, make the thing, let them cheers you at the premiere, and, keep journeying on.
We feel like we've got a few questions that we're sparking here, and they're sort of similar, and we may have answered them, but somebody is sort of saying, how do you personally handle that communication if you don't see eye to eye? It's sort of the flip side of the coin. If your agents are presenting you with material that they think is right or good for you, and you don't see it, what does that communication look like? If you've ever been in that situation.
No, you're smiling. I want to see what you say.
Oh, I'm notoriously the worst. They know I love no. I say no a lot. I say no a lot. I try to use humor. Honestly, I just try to use humor. I try to use tact. And you just have to be, at the end of the day, it's really hard for actors specifically and artists in general, but you just have to get used to being uncomfortable with, like, maybe they might be mad at you for a second, and that's okay. Like, maybe they might just be a little salty and have a little attitude, and you just have to be like, all right, we'll move past it. Like,
but also, Dee, we can't get mad at something that you have a reason for. Like, I think I speak on behalf of Andrea and hopefully all reps. We're not here to force anyone to do anything they don't want to do. We can't, you can only bring a horse to water. And as long as we have those things that we touch on, that we talk about, the reasons why, I can't fault you for having your own reasons. And then just knowing those reasons going into other projects just helps me inform exactly what you're looking for, so that we can zero in on that one project, that one role that is really fulfilling.
I think as representatives, at the end of the day, it's always the client's decision as to why you do a job, why you don't do a job. We're here to sort of guide the decision-making process and give you the pros and cons on how it works, why working with a certain director is the smart thing to do, why doing a certain project or signing on to a television series is the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, it always goes back to the client and their decision-making.
I wanted to sort of go back a little bit at the beginning. Obviously, the reason why you're all here is because you have exemplary, fantastic working relationships. And in the beginning, Max and DeWanda both talked about you, as being superstars. And so, but we always, wherever we are, have goals and things we want to achieve. And so I'm wondering for Andrew, for all of you, how do you manage expectation, but how do you measure success? What does success look like in this relationship for all of you? Is it about achieving goals you've discussed? How are you, yes.
I think for me, how I measure a client success, and this is going to sound very corny and very Pollyanna, is I just, at the end, and Max is laughing because he knows what I'm going to say. I think at the end of the day, I really just want the people that I work with to be proud of the work that they put out in the world. Obviously, you want everybody to be able to be financially stable. And that was a conversation that Max and I took very, very seriously when we talked about it. But I think at the end of the day, everyone has milestones that they want to achieve. And it can be, I want to do something in 1 year. I want to do something 8 years from now. And I think at the end of the day, if you can walk away from something and say, my client is very, very proud of the work that they've put out in the world, that to me is how you measure the success.
Andrea, put it perfectly.
This is not answering, this is kind of off topic, but I do feel it's necessary to talk about luck a little bit.
Yes, please.
I think that there are very few instances, you were talking about no's before. I think there's probably two times in my life I've passed on something I should have done. There are at least 50 times there's been something I've been desperate to do that I didn't get, that would have ended my career. I mean, just countless things that I thought, if, I would give my left arm to be a part of this project. And for whatever reason, it didn't work out, and sometimes in very painful ways. And often those projects have not turned out well, and my judgment was off. And so it's been such a reminder in my life that as much as we think we're in control of these things, and we think we're clever when things work out, so many times we've just been lucky, and there's so much luck involved in all of this. It's such a risky, crazy casino business to be in. You kind of have to have a gambling mentality to do it. I like playing poker. It really reminds me of poker. It's a really similar thing. You know, when I think about evaluating projects, or you know, it's such a similar thing to like looking at a deck of cards and predicting the odds, and you're going to get them wrong sometimes. And I think we all have to try and let go a little bit of results. When you talk about success, for me, the idea of tying that to result is impossible. The only way of measuring success is to hopefully be able to look back at the things you've done and understand why you did them. You know, especially as an actor, right? Like as an actor, you don't control the material, you don't control the edit. There's a lack of autonomy to that. And so you have to make peace with it, and embrace that, I think, and be able to look back and go, okay, I know why I engage with all of these things. Some of them are going to exceed your expectations, some of them will disappoint you. But if you're engaged by the process of them, then that to me is all the success you could probably ask for.
I love that as a measure of success. I love that. Thank you. Couple of quick audience questions. That we have an actor who seems like they are working fairly steadily, fairly happy with their acting career and their representation, but they're nervous about presenting the idea of producing and directing projects to their agent. They don't want to be perceived negatively. I don't really understand why it would be a negative, but they're apprehensive about dipping their feet into producing and directing and how to have that conversation with their agent. So do you have any tips or advice for when you're maybe seen as one thing and you want to do something else and you're nervous about how your representation might react?
What do you think, Dee?
I'm like Anabel. I think honestly, it just stems back to it's so hard, y'all. I'm just gonna speak directly to all the beautiful actors in the Zoom. It is really like our job is so weird to say. Our job is perception, right? Our job is to at least have some kind of mindfulness, some kind of self-awareness of how we're coming across so that we're not just doing whatever on screen or on stage or, you know, on TV. But if you are somehow, whatever your practice is, able to separate that kind of like self-awareness from self-consciousness, that is gold. Then you're in gold territory. All to say, you know, there really shouldn't be any conversation, you know, that you can't have respectfully with your reps. There shouldn't be. There shouldn't be any conversation, you know, like I said, outside of calling someone out of their name that you cannot have with your representative. And, you know, just by way of encouragement, you know, we are in the golden age of multi-hyphenates. Like that's what everyone's looking for. It's been the case for a number of years now. You know what I mean? I only have to like, look at my peers. We got Donald Glover, we got Issa Rae, we got Michaela Coel. We have all these incredible artists who are full artists. You know, I think about Blitz, this phenomenal director I know who's also a visual artist. He's also a musician. Like, you know, nothing, if you are creative, true creative can stop you from creating. So there should be no shame to that, you know? And, you know, if that veers you into directing, producing, and writing, let it. And like I said before, you know, you bring it up to your agents, you see if there's like, you know, a member of your team potentially that you can add from the lit department. And, you know, if not, then you're going to have to do the grunt work yourself. And then they might join you on the ride afterwards. But nothing should ever stop you from following that instinct.
I love that. We had a quick question, which I think harkens back to something we were talking about before that you just mentioned. You said, you know, add someone from the literary department to your team. And the question earlier was, how do you go about just doing that, like growing your team organically? I think earlier it sounded like the agents were expressing interest in the clients, but I guess this is the reverse. Like, how would you go about suggesting something that doesn't already exist that you want to make happen?
I think that's a good Anabel question. Like if someone comes and they're like, I need the model person, like I need all the people.
I mean, I think it just goes back to, well, first, it just starts with a conversation with your team. I think going back to what DeWanda said too, we're a team of surrounding our client for a reason. We're here to support that client, and the goals and the wishes that they want to achieve. And so, you know, hearing someone out and understanding the ambition that they have for a long-term career should be music to your team's ears too, because we're just as ambitious. And I think, you know, it may not be an immediate yes, and it may not be an immediate, you know, there may not be an immediate kind of change that happens, but just even expressing it maybe puts that little grain in their head that kind of grows as we all grow together. And, you know, back to what DeWanda said too, maybe you have to kind of put a little more on your shoulders to make it happen in the quick way that you want it to. You know, I think we're all like battle with being patient at times in this industry, and this industry tries our patience a lot. So, you know, do what you can as well on your own end, but just also make sure that people know exactly what you're doing. And oftentimes there are clients that pop up and say, hey, I just directed a short, or hey, I just wrote this thing. And I'm like, oh, great, this is awesome. You know, I will happily read it, watch it, whatever, you know, talk about it, feedback. At the end of the day, we're here for our clients.
I would say too, I would add, because you just made me think of this, just come correct, like create the pitch deck, create the one sheet, like put the summary together, like start building the material so that when you're reaching out to your agent, you know, it doesn't feel like, oh, like it doesn't feel like it's coming out of the blue, that it feels like, oh, there's thought and action that has gone into, you know, this desire that I'd like you to help me come to fruition.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to another question that we just got about general meetings and how to make them more impactful when you're meeting producers or development executives. You know, it's just they come with a really good package of materials, correct?
And
Yeah, I didn't learn that lesson until I was like 35.
I knew that's why.
I'm serious. I did 18 years of general meetings where I just was like, oh, that was nice. We had a great time. We had a nice coffee. I had no idea that you were supposed to like be productive or come correct, as you said. So yeah, only recently did I realize, you know, you should have an idea of something to talk about in those meetings for sure.
I think have an idea. Oh, sorry, DeWanda. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I think have an idea of something, but I think also just having a sense as an actor when you go into a general meeting of your taste, and also getting the background, which is really incumbent upon your representatives, of who you're meeting with, what they've worked on, doing your research, doing your homework, so that you sort of set yourself up in the best light to then go have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not necessarily expecting people to show up with a reel or some kind of projected something to show you, or a pitch packet, or okay.
Hopefully those things have been sent beforehand, so that also, you know, the executive or producer, whoever is on the other side of that meeting, has done their research too, and they're armed with that information. But yeah, I know some people don't like general meetings as much as others. DeWanda. But
why are we what are we meeting about?
But I said this to DeWanda, and I say this to everybody too, like, you know, we're setting you up with these people because we personally like them, you know, whether you don't like their work of credits, or, you know, the one project that they're working on right now. I think that we all have long careers in this industry, and I'm setting you up with that person because I can see a connection for, you know, a long-term kind of strategy. So yeah, just keep it in mind.
Yeah. Anabel sent me, for context of why I'm being the worst right now, Anabel sent me out on a general like earlier this year, and something came out of it. And I was like, oh, those work? All this time? Oh, really? You're not just going to forget who I am in 6 months? Oh, that's cool.
They pay off, whether it's later that year, in 2 years, in 5 years, you know, people remember, just because at the end of the day, we're a people industry. And so I really feel that.
Thank you all so much for sharing your time and energy with us. We do need to wrap. If there's any last advice you have about building a healthy, long-lasting, beneficial relationship What would you say to our audience of actors?
I've definitely heard a lot of people like complain about their reps to me. And I often think that they are not taking enough responsibility for their own career. And again, there's so much luck involved in all of this. I think that's a huge, huge part of all of it. But you have to do the work yourself. I think, to me, maybe I'm wrong, it seems that, you know, an agent's job is to give you the opportunity, but they can't get you the opportunity. You have to do that yourself. You have to do the heavy lifting. And I thought what Dee said is so smart and wise about, even with your own representation, doing the homework, being prepared, not taking anything for granted. We're all very, very lucky to do this. It's a choice to do this with our lives and a privilege to do it. And you know, we can't be entitled about it. That seems crazy.
Yeah.
So that's my only thing.
Yeah. Ditto, kiddo. And I think, yeah, just remembering to be a human being first, you know, and that you are just speaking with other human beings. Anabel and I were talking about this yesterday because, of course, we're both type A and had a pre-call for this. But so often there's like this very odd, super capitalistic introduction of power in these relationships, and it goes either way. It's either like, oh, you know, my agent, like, oh, I don't want to bother, like the agent's up here and you're like, I don't want to bother them, or, you know, like, I don't want to come across this way. So you place your agent on a pedestal, or you're on the opposite side of the spectrum, which is like, they work for me, or you're the same person and it vacillates between they work for me and putting, you know, the rep up on a pedestal. And it's like, these are your partners. These are your partners, you know, find partners with whom you align deeply, you know, allow your goals, you know, like Andrea and Max have done, like allow your goals to like grow together, stay in lockstep as much as you possibly can. You know, go to lunch, like get to know who they are as human beings. And, you know, really build that foundation of actual relationship, you know, trust, integrity, communication, humanity, because ultimately that's, to me, when you ask what success is and how you measure success, it's not a credit question. It's not a like, oh, this was my, you know, for agents on the agent side, oh, this was my like campaign, or this was my, you know, project that I was working on thing. It's more about like, can you walk away from this career knowing that you built something beautiful with people you wanted to build it with?
Well said.
I don't know if Anabel and Andrea want to go after that, but if you have any closing comments.
No, that was perfect. That was everything that I think either of us wanted to say.
Agree. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for doing this, Rochelle. It's great.
Thank you,
Thank you so much for giving up your time for our audience of actors. Thank you for joining us, and long may your relationships continue. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.